All right. Well, thank you for your patience while we got through that. So thank you for coming. This is a webinar on signs of the apocalypse. No, I'm just kidding, but it seems like we almost have those going on now between fires and smoke and all of that. So Lord have mercy on us, and let's figure out what we can do in this, what we can do with the lemons that we've been dealt this year, okay? So my role is I'm the director of the Online Pastoral Center and our Growing Up Catholic Ministry, which is our ministry focused on whole family catechesis. And this is a picture of my family. So we live in Alameda, right across the bay. I'm a Bay Area native. I grew up in San Jose. I have family on the peninsula, so and came over to the East Bay to go to Cal. So you see my daughters there as well as my wife, and we all share in this ministry together. So we've been all hands on deck recently because things have been busy with all of the leaders trying to figure out what to do this year. So let's dive in here. We have pandemic problems, don't we? And of course, our greatest concern, we have to go back to those who are sick, those who have passed away, the healthcare workers, those who have lost jobs, those who are in government trying to protect us, etc. But of course, it's affecting us greatly in terms of our worship, religious education, and all of that. So before we get into the specifics of where we're at this year and the unique ways that we will need to respond, we need to back up for a minute first and just realize that we had a problem before this pandemic ever happened. And this is one of the slides I show that I've been showing for a number of years about just reminding us that mass attendance has been on a decline for a long time. We have declines in the number of children in our sacramental preparation programs or those who are being baptized. We have lots of studies that are telling us about the disaffiliation of youth. And all of this together, we have to realize that what's going on is that the passing on of faith from one generation to the next generation has slowed down or stopped. And that means that what we're doing as a whole, as a church, is not working at some level. Those of us, you know, it's natural for us when things are in this strange time where we can't even gather for liturgy that we just want to go back to things as usual, business as usual. But is that really what we want to go back to? So we can just be in this state of denial where we just keep on doing what we've been doing. And you know, that's what some say the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the results to be different, which Albert Einstein probably never said, but is still a helpful quote to focus us. So if we want things to change, it's going to have to start with us. It's going to have to start with the church leadership, with those of us who are in roles that can, you know, influence those of us who come into our parishes. And you know what? This is a great time to start that change. It might seem like this is a challenging time to try to do something different, but something different is happening. And so we can take advantage of that and initiate the change that we want to happen. Now, if you're curious about why that decline is there and you want to learn more about it, why are folks leaving the church? Why are youth disaffiliating? We have a growing number of studies from a number of different sources. National Study of Youth and Religion from the University of Notre Dame, Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate from Georgetown, the Pew Research Center. There's this great book from St. Mary's Press, Going, Gone. And they're focusing on those reasons. And if you look across the board, it's not one specific reason, but the underlying factor that's under all of those reasons that we're seeing is it's the parents. It's the role of parents in the family and whether or not they're effectively passing on faith to their children. They're the ones who decide if the family comes to Mass. They're the ones who drive the car. They're the ones who set the family priorities. And they're the ones who bring faith into everyday life, which is what the children notice. So just some quick highlights from one of those studies, the National Study of Youth and Religion. That's the one from Notre Dame. They did a landmark 10-year study. And what they found is that the single greatest predictor of whether faith is passed on is the role of parents. not whether the child went to Catholic school or whether the child went to faith formation or other factors. The biggest factor was how the parents saw their own role. And it was not just about whether they were practicing or being particularly devout in their faith, but the decisive criterion was whether the parents talked about if they saw living and teaching the faith as part of parenting, if they saw that part of their job as a parent was to pass on faith. And the sort of things that made a difference were whether they talked about faith in everyday life, whether it came up in conversation, religious activities, did they participate in the faith, such as seasonally, or part of that is going to Mass each week, but also just communicating the importance of faith in their own lives. You know, did they talk about it as something that was a priority for them? For the parents that did those things, they were much more likely to have children that remained Catholic into adulthood. And this makes sense, right? I mean, this is a bit of a silly slide, but this shows the hours a week that are spent with children. And we just have to remember, as catechists, in the best case scenario, we're going to have a very small amount of time in front of those children over the course of a year, compared to how much time mothers and fathers have. So it's that influence over the course of time that is going to have an impact on the faith of that child. Now, whether or not you care about these statistics and the numbers, the Church has taught for a long time in very strong language that the role of parents is central in passing on faith. And they call it irreplaceable and essential and almost impossible to substitute. And this is coming from Vatican II documents, the Catechism, the General Directory for Catechesis, statements by popes. The Church teaches this, and the Church is right. And I think we know this in our hearts. And many of us may even use a lot of this language and talk about that this should be the role of parents. The question is if we back that up with actions to help make that a reality. And the new directory for catechesis that just came out of the Vatican also helps us remember the central place of parents, which it talks about quite a bit, and this understanding that what we're doing within catechesis needs to be centered in evangelization, the process of passing on the faith. We can't get lost in just thinking that it's about passing on the facts of the faith, helping the kids pass tests about what Catholicism is, but it's really about, are we helping the faith grow in the hearts, not only of children, but of their parents, and helping their parents work with their children on that. So anyway, just summing up here, what we're hearing from the studies and from what the Church is teaching is that active, verbal Catholic parents tend to result in lifelong Catholic kids. So this is something where, I guess if we back up and look at this and say, are we doing everything that we can to help the parents to step into that role? Now, the way we talk about it here at the Pastoral Center is that we think that we need to shift in our understanding of parents. We need to turn those parents into catechists of their own children. And that doesn't mean that we're out of a job. It means that as catechists, we need to turn into coaches of those parents. We need to shift our primary mindset from trying to do whatever we can in the small number of minutes per week that we have with those kids, to just focus on the kids, to figure out how we can focus on supporting those parents so that they can be forming those kids throughout the week and all of the time that they have, so that they can show the importance of the faith to their kids, because that's what's going to make a difference. Okay, so let's get back to this year, what we're calling the year of the domestic church. So for as long as it lasts, faith formation and worship is going to be centered in the home, whether we like it or not. And I've talked to many, many leaders at many different parishes, and many of our regulars have been taking a whole family approach to catechesis for a number of years. And for those leaders, the kind of response that I'm getting from them, what I'm hearing is they'll say, well, it's not ideal, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not this complete crisis, because what I hear from them, this is a quote from one of them, our families know how to do this on their own. So what they're focusing on is what they can send home to those parents who know what to do with those resources. Now, even if your community isn't at that point, we do have an opportunity to still do that, to use this as an opportunity to give them some resources that help them during this time to take on that active role. So we're going to be looking at this challenge of, because children and families can't come into the parish, what can we do and use this as an opportunity to shift them into an active role? Okay, so when I talk about this, for folks who are not doing it already, these are the kinds of concerns that come up and maybe in the back of your head. You're probably thinking, well, the parents, they're not motivated to share their faith. They don't know how to share their faith. Parents don't think it's their job to share the faith. They think it's our job. And parents are busy and stressed, especially at this time. And parents, many of them don't have the fire of faith in their own hearts so that they can share it with someone else. And I'm going to point out that these are the same concerns that we had before the pandemic. They're really not different. I mean, maybe there's a bit more busyness and stress, although parents aren't running all over the place trying to get their kids to lessons and practices and such. So it's a different time, but most of these concerns are exactly the same as before the pandemic. So our opportunity here is that we have an excuse with these parents to put them in an active role. I mean, they know that we can't do it for them this year because we can't be in front of their kids, at least physically. I think there is some extra time that's available, and certainly before school started, I think there was more boredom going on in families, maybe less so as we start transitioning into the school year. But especially during this challenging time, families need that faith anchor more than ever. And so the starting point for this is that we're going to have to shift our expectations and have a different attitude about what parents can do. And this is what we recommend at all times, because I think a lot of us have pretty low expectations about parents because they're not doing what we would want them to do. But the thing is, we have not really helped them or coached them into that role. So we need to believe in the parents, and we have seen time and time again parishes that take on a coaching mentality, that they see their parents rising up to their higher expectations. Okay, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritty for this year, and let's talk about some things that will not work and some things that can work this year. We're just going to break it down and go through a number of these different questions. Feel free to think about if you have any questions about any of these specifics or anything that I don't cover, and you can type it into the chat box for me to cover or for us to discuss afterwards. But here's some key things that we think could be road bumps as we try to move forward. Okay. First thing is, it's really not going to work for us to assume how we're going to be able to gather. Some of you may be hoping to do some in-person gathering. And let me just say this, that even if the government clears for us to do it, your local government and state government, I'm right across the bay, I know what it's like. Even if the archdiocese gives you a green light, even if your pastor gives you a green light, many families may not feel comfortable and they may not show up even if you host the gatherings. Or we may have a back and forth. I mean, we've had that situation where we've opened up for worship at some of our parishes here, and then we had to close down for worship because things got worse. So the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, right? But what we really need in this situation, because we can't be sure what we're going to get, is we need to be ready for anything and everything. And by that, I mean that we recommend that you take a flexible approach where you choose a resource or create a resource that you're going to use that you can use in a variety of different ways, that can be used in person, that could be used over a virtual video connection, that could be used at home for families who may not have easy access to internet, for example. So if you can find a solution that's going to work for any of those, then you can switch this year to any of those different modes, but you don't have to change your fundamental approach or the resource. You can kind of pick it up right where you left off. Something else that is not going to work this year is trying to replace parents. So this doesn't work in any year, as I was talking about, and this is an opportunity to shift toward parents in an active role. So what we need to do at all times, during the pandemic and then afterward is to put parents at the center of the process so that they're being formed and they're forming their own kids, and they continue to do that in everyday life. And we hear about that in the new directory for catechesis, saying that believing parents, those who believe, have the most effective capacity to transmit the beauty of the Christian faith to their children. We simply can't replace them as catechists, no matter how good of a job we do. It also says that the greatest challenge is to overcome the mentality of delegation that is so common. They're talking about this idea of parents delegating their responsibility to raise their kids in the faith. So right in the Vatican document that's guiding us on how we do catechesis. We also think that it's not going to work this year to have more screen time or a focus on screen time. And that's because there's a lot of screen fatigue and Zoom fatigue happening in families. I'm not saying that we don't use technology at all this year. I think there is some value to that, but I think we have to have it limited. I don't think all of whatever we're doing for faith formation should be centered around the screen, because I think you're going to find resistance from families. I mean, just think about that. A lot of these kids, I mean, my two daughters they're just hearing details of what distance learning is going to look like for them here where we're at in Alameda County, in Alameda. And it's a lot of screen time. It's not all screen time, but there's just going to be resistance to having more of that. And we have to remember there's also a digital divide for some of our families who do not have internet access or just good enough access that they're going to want to do this. So we actually think that this is an opportunity for some low-tech family time. Instead of making this like one more online class, how do we help give families an option where they can actually connect with each other, that they can do some sharing and talking about their faith, what matters most in life, talk about things that really matter and connect with each other and tell stories and use paper. that is actually going to be appealing on this different level and a contrast to what they're doing in the rest of their schooling. Now, I talked about how we want to turn parents into catechists, but I don't think it's going to work for us to treat parents like your catechists. And by that I mean that all parents do not have the commitment, the confidence, the knowledge to suddenly start teaching a catechism class. I mean, you wouldn't sign all of them up to be your catechist if we were doing in-person classes or gatherings. On the other hand, they're experts on their own children, so they have a unique advantage, but what they need is support from us, and they need coaching. So what we need to do is we need to find a way to form the parents and help them practice sharing faith with their kids without making too many assumptions about them. So we need to coach parents from where they're at, not where we would hope for them to be. And this is possible. We just have to work our process and our resources around that. And I'll give you some more examples as we move forward. We also can't assume, as part of this, we can't assume that parents are going to prepare beforehand. They simply won't. So what we need to do is take an approach that's going to guide parents in the moment. Give them a resource that's going to step them through with their kids, assuming they're doing this, you know, on their own with their kids, or maybe we might be able to facilitate a little bit through video or coach them to get them started. But we want them to have a resource where they're going to be guided along the way, because they're not going to start an hour early and read through a bunch of things to understand the process. We do not think that this year a doctrine-first approach is going to work well. Now, it doesn't mean that we're giving up on teaching doctrine or teaching about many of the beautiful details about our faith. It simply doesn't come first, and it didn't come first in our faith story with Jesus. It came first with relationship. So relationship with God, relationship with each other within the church. So I think this is what's going to resonate with families and parents and is our opportunity if we can sell what we're doing as a relationship oriented approach. So faith is not an academic subject. We need to understand the teachings of the church, but that's not enough, and that's not where it starts. That's secondary. And the Directory for Catechesis points this out actually again and again. It's one of the central insights, I guess, that it really wants to drive home. So it says, Catechesis with families is permeated by the kerygma, the core of the faith, the core story and teaching and person of Jesus. This message has to occupy the center of all evangelizing activity. And it reminds us that catechesis is in the center of evangelization, that if we're not doing evangelization when we do catechesis, something is missing. And the relationship that faith is rooted in starts in the family, right? Children learn about God's love. They learn about what it means to love one another and how God loves us by how it is modeled by their parents. So it starts by the relationships in the family, that domestic church. And then they move to have their own relationship with God, with Christ. And the parents will hopefully have that, a growing relationship with Christ. And we also have this relationship with the community, the body of Christ, with our parish community and the broader church. So our faith has to be rooted in this, and we have to help in whatever we're doing in our faith formation is helping grow all of these relationships. That's where it all starts, and that's what's going to be the sticky part of the faith that makes it last through adulthood. And then when children and parents get more interest in the faith because of the power of these relationships, we move into doing the catechesis of the teaching the details, answering the questions, learning more about the faith, but the evangelization has to come first. And I think that's where we have a disconnect and where the faith isn't being passed on to the next generation, because this evangelization is not happening. And we don't have parents in the process and engaged in helping that evangelization of their own children happen. Okay, so next, something else that's not going to work this year is a comprehensive approach where we just try to cover everything and all of those catechism points. I just don't think it's really possible this year if all of our formation is happening in homes. So what can we start with? We start with the basics. We start with those relationships and the stories of relationships. And this is, again, the term that in formal church language we call the kerygma, the story of salvation history and of Jesus. So again, here's what the Directory of Catechesis says. It's actually responding to those who say, well, if you just focus on this core, then you're not getting to the really important stuff. Well, here's what the Vatican's saying in response. We must not think that in catechesis, the kerygma, that core, gives way to a supposedly more solid formation. Nothing is more solid, profound, secure, meaningful, and wisdom-filled than that initial proclamation. So it's saying start with the basics. Make sure that you do the basics well, because we might teach all these details, but our kids and parents and families together, are they really getting that core? Are they getting it well? If they were, then we would see different numbers in those charts of how many are coming to Mass each week or how many are coming for the sacraments. Okay, this year, textbooks, digital or not, we don't think that they're going to work well. First off, parents are intimidated by textbooks. The heavier the resource that you provide for them to work with their kids, the more they're going to recoil from it. They are not interested in helping their kids with one more academic remote learning subject this year. I'll tell you that. Just talking to our other families in our neighborhood here, they're already overwhelmed with trying to support their kids through all of their regular classes. So if they perceive faith formation as a class, especially this year, but really this is all the time, parents are going to see it as an optional class, as something that they do not have to do. But I do think that we have a shot at selling family time and on them growing closer together, on them getting off of their devices, on them just having special time, because that's time that oftentimes we as parents just forget about to actually dedicate to just focusing on being present to our own kids. So we think that the approach that will work and that we've seen work effectively is some light interactive handouts, lightweight, meaning not too many pages, and handouts that are where the purpose is in driving conversation, in helping them talk about things that matter in life with a faith foundation. Now, we're not going to be able to assume that parents are going to stick with whatever process we give to them. And this is a top risk that families will just sit this year out or are going to give up. So if the process is not appealing to them, and if we can't sell it to them, they're just going to stop. They're either not going to start, or if they start in and it's not appealing, they're going to stop. So I'll tell you that nothing delights us more with our own resources when we're getting feedback from parents and we hear words like this. These are the words that we look for. We look for words like helpful and useful, worthwhile, relevant, and fun. If you get those words, you know that you're winning over parents. So we're going to have to be kind of tough with ourselves and really think about what is it that we're giving to these parents and to these families. Are we going to get words like these coming back from those families when they actually use it? So we need to offer a process that families will actually love, that they're not just doing it in order to do it. Because this year we just can't make them participate, I don't think. Okay, so now I'd like to talk a little bit about this coaching parents process and let you see some details of what it actually looks like, how it can work, whether we're doing it in a parish setting or whether we're sending it all home for parents to do with their children. So before we think about just this year, I want to ask this question of what is the ideal formation process if we believe all of these things that I've been saying, that we need to prioritize parents in the picture and a whole family approach. So there's kind of two extremes that we can think about in terms of formation models or situations. So on one extreme would be the parish facilitated model where professional church people like us, the leaders, the catechists, are facilitating the whole process, and those who come are in kind of a passive role, or they're the ones who are responding. On the other extreme, we could imagine a parent facilitated process where the parent is taking full leadership, and we really aren't in the picture at all. And maybe in a perfect world with parents who are fully formed and who have been evangelized themselves, they can just take it without even needing anything from us. Now, I think in the reality of the situation, and actually what our church teaching would suggest, is the ideal model would be a dual facilitated model. And that means that there are roles to play for us as catechists, catechetical leaders within the parish, and there are active roles to play for parents. And so this is kind of a handoff process where someone from the parish side will orchestrate the process in some way. And there's ways to do that this year, whether or not we're in person, but we're kind of orchestrating the process and leading aspects, but then passing it off to parents for parts of these events, for them to work directly with their children, for them to be the leader and the catechist with their own children. Okay, so for this year, let's talk about what those two could look like. So dual facilitated could be kind of what we expect normal in-person to be if we're able to gather at some point this year, maybe toward the end of the year. And that's that everyone can show up. We do things just as normal and can do it as a big group with parents and kids in the same room if we're doing a whole family approach. But we may this year in person be doing it with limits, say with a limited number of families, parents and children, because those are the restrictions that we have to keep folks safe. We also may be able to do live video facilitation, something like what I'm doing with you, although this is pretty one way so far. Hopefully it would be something where it's dual, where you could do the same kind of orchestration and kind of introduce sections of the process and then say, okay, parents, do this activity with your kids, and they work on it. And then you come back again onto the video and lead them to the next part. Another way to do that, if you can't or it's just not feasible to do live, is to pre-record some video facilitation. This would be recording and posting on YouTube, putting it on your parish website, etc. A kind of introduction that they can play on their computers on demand that says, here's how do you use this resource. This is what the first page looks like. You do this. Step them through maybe the first couple of pages or the process so that they have the confidence to do it. Now, on the other side would be if we don't have any of those dual facilitated, if that's just beyond you or beyond the capacity that you have in your parish, would be what we'd say is a pure homeschool model But in this case, then the resource itself, the page, the printed page, is going to have to do the coaching for you. It has to be easy to follow and something that parents can handle. And these are things that you can create yourself, or you can create kind of an add-on resource or page that does that with a resource that maybe wasn't designed for this. But ideally, the whole resource is designed for this approach. So I want to talk to you about what that resource could look like. And I'm going to give you some ingredients for a successful whole family event, whether that whole family event means individual families in their homes working on their own, or one of those dual facilitated models. And what you're going to need is you're going to need a good resource that will work for this situation. You can't just give them a textbook or a digital textbook that was not designed for this, because the parents are most likely going to get lost or intimidated or give up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some examples from our newest resource. It's our Faith Stories, Growing Up Catholic Faith Stories resource. That's designed exactly to do this, because the best way that I can show you how to do it, our expression of that is by creating resources. And you can steal our approaches and our principles and do it on your own, or you can take a look at ours if you think it would be worthwhile for your community. So let me talk you through how this works in practice. So the parents and children are obviously going to sit together. This is less obvious when we're doing it within a parish, but if you're gathering, then you gather in family groupings. Those are the triangles. Now, if they're at home, of course, they're sitting together. But here's how we design the resource. So we actually have, these are booklets. This particular resource, it's just 8 pages for a session. And on one side of the page, on the left, is the parent side. That has their instructions and some things we want them to do. And on the right side, in general, is the child side. So they sit with that orientation. In the resource, we number the steps to make it brain dead easy for the parents to follow, even if they're looking at it for the first time. So like I said, they're not going to prepare. They're not going to prepare before the session. So we coach them through step by step. So you'll see on the pages those gray boxes there with the big numbers, the blue numbers on top. Those are what the parents read, and it tells them exactly what to do. Talk to your child about this. Tell them a story about this here. Read the story. Have your child read this story out loud now. Work on this activity. We tell them exactly what to do just for that page where they're at. Then we need to give them the answers to any activities, and we do this because some of them don't know the answers. A lot of these parents are on the margins, they're not, they haven't had any catechesis since they were children, perhaps. But most importantly for this, we never want to make them look bad in front of their own kids because they don't know the answers and they're confused. So the way we do this is in the resources, we'll either put the answers right in the parent, those gray boxes, or sometimes we'll put it at the end of the resource, just an answer key. So they can look that up together if they need to. Element number 5 here, or ingredient 5, is that we want to get families talking. So remember, that's the key point that all of these stories all of these studies are telling us actually make a difference, right? In the faith being passed on. Do the families talk about the faith in daily life? So we want them to practice this, to become comfortable, to learn how to do this. So we actually build our resources around this as a goal. So oftentimes there'll be an activity. This is a very standard kind of approach where we'll have an activity, they'll do something together, and then we'll be constantly asking them to talk it through with their kids. And whether it's talking about stories or answering questions, we ask them to do that together. That's throughout the process. Ingredient number 6 is that we want to think about forming the parents along the way. So our focus isn't just on the kids and the kids growing in faith, but the stronger the faith of the parents, the stronger the faith of the kids is going to be in the long run. And so we want this to be a process that speaks to both of them. So one way that we do this in our resources is that we'll have an activity on the right side of the page, and the first box, the number 1 there, will say, make sure your child knows how to do this and get them started on their activity. And then box number 2, and then we'll say, and then read the next box below. And then we talk directly to the parent in adult language for something that we want them to understand. Again, they're not going to prepare beforehand, so we use this time while their child's working on the activity to help them understand more about the concept that's going on here, what's most important for them to know on an adult level and on a parent level. The other thing that we tend to do in our resources is that we have some parallelism where we don't want just the children to be doing activities and the parent saying, here, do this activity, and then the parent sits there. What we often do is we have the children doing an activity, and then we have the parent doing a similar activity at the same time. They work through them. In this one, it's about understanding the gifts that God has given us, and maybe understanding the gifts that God has given our child. So we give the parent their marching orders for what they're filling in. They do the activity at the same time, and then we ask them to talk about, why did you give these answers? So this is an approach that is going to help them both grow in their faith, not just the parent acting as if they're a teacher who knows everything already. We all need to be growing in our faith and continuing to be evangelized. Ingredient 7 is to make it interesting and fun. Like I said earlier on, if it's not a good experience for the families, they're just going to stop doing it. So we want it to be fun, worthwhile, something that they identify as a value to their family. So we try to have fun and interesting activities in there. We make it story-based. Most of our key resources are very story-based. So we're having these families tell stories to each other, the stories of our faith, and connecting them with the stories of our lives. And finally, ingredient 8 is that we need to remember to keep it about the basics, the kerygma, about the relationships, about the core of what's going to matter in passing on the faith. Sometimes we get so caught up in teaching the theological facts that we forget that it's about loving Jesus and how we help the families to grow into deeper relationship with Jesus. For the parents and the kids, it's just as important, more important for the parents to grow in that relationship, because then they can help their kids to grow into that relationship. How can we expect kids to do this if their parents won't do it? Okay, so those are the ingredients that you can put into practice on whatever you're doing for your formation process, whether it's in pandemic time or whether it's in post-pandemic time. It's going to have the same effect. And so we have this opportunity to shift into this role with the pandemic, because the families know that we can't do it for them during this time. So let me briefly give you a little overview of the kinds of resources that we have that can help you do this. I'm not going to go into lots of details on them, but if you have questions about them afterwards, I'm happy to answer them, or to talk to you individually. We're happy to have you call us or shoot us emails. So the examples that I was giving come from our Growing Up Catholic Faith Stories new curriculum that just came out this summer, designed for parents, and it works well for any of these flexible models, for facilitated, for at home, for hybrid, for virtual. You can use these same handouts for any of those models, and we give you tips on how to facilitate when you're in that role. It's 3 different themes, so it's usually done in a 3-year cycle, with 15 sessions per year, English, Spanish, and bilingual editions. And for each of those, for younger kids under 10 and older kids for 11 to 14. And they're exactly parallel, so a family could use them for those different ages all at the same time, them all working through the activities together. And you can either print them yourself, $6 per child, or we can print them for you as full color booklets for $12 per child. And you can get full access to the whole program and everything in it to review and start planning for just $12 flat fee. Okay, those are all the common questions I get that I would get if I didn't say that here. So we also have a sacramental preparation program that works in a very similar way, designed for parents, 6 sessions per sacrament, English, Spanish, bilingual, older and younger children, handout based, and we can print or you can print. And this is our most popular resource over our ministry over the last 10 years. Then we have a whole bunch of other kind of a la carte whole family sessions or resources with activities that you can mix and match to create your own. A lot of fun and kind of interactive and creative activities, a lot of them based on multiple intelligences. So they work well for children, and they just kind of keep them moving because they're short. And just some examples, fall learning centers, we give you 3 events in Spanish and English. There are 3 events that you can use in the fall timeframe. You can send them all home and families can do them on their own, or you can help facilitate. So it's 7 activities per event, and it's just a flat $14 fee for your parish for each language, for English or Spanish. And then you own it forever and make as many copies as you want. Similar thing for this Lenten event, help families prepare for Lent. It's one single event with 4 interactive fun activities for them to decide together, make some commitments, $15 flat fee. And we have a worship at home. This is a free resource that we put into place at the beginning of the pandemic to allow families to worship together. It's really tough to get kids engaged in streaming liturgy and be in a really passive role. And so this is based and inspired on Sunday celebrations in the absence of a priest, based on what the Catechism says about when we can't gather for in-person worship. And it's a dynamic kind of multimedia sort of thing. So we coach parents through how to do this. And we just ask, you can take a look. So just to explain a little bit better, at the top and bottom, we give an opening and closing song. They're drawn from our Vacation Bible School, so they tend to have motions for the kids to follow. At least some of them do. There's usually a little fun video that kind of breaks open the gospel reading for the day, but we have everything in there in terms of the prayers and coach the parents. There's a little video to help them not be intimidated in going. And we've gotten this incredible feedback from some families who have said that this has made their children interested in liturgy and worship in Mass, and is helping them understand what it means because they're going through and doing it themselves, not Mass, but doing a liturgy of the word service and learning about it. If you're interested, we ask you to do click on the leader link on that page and register with us, just so we can be in touch with you and tell you about, we're not going to do it forever, so we want to be in touch with you to let you know about potential changes. Okay. And then we do have some other free, we offer these with free will offering. There's no donation needed, but free resources for this coronavirus time across all ministries. So adult formation, parish as a whole, as well as catechetical. So for unemployed people, a small group resource. For older adults, doing face sharing during the pandemic from their perspective, etc. So take advantage of those from our website. You can learn more about us on either our Growing Up Catholic website that focuses on the whole family approach and our focus specifically on families, as well as our main store website, which is where you would get all of the resources eventually, but this also has all of the adult formation pieces in all different parish ministries. Our focus really is on supporting pastoral ministers within the parish. You can get in touch with me at this email address and this phone number. We do try to answer the phone live, although I'm getting a heck of a lot of phone calls these days. So if we cannot pick up right when you call, leave a message and we can get back in touch with you very quickly. Or send questions by email. Happy to respond.